about 3D investigation of the battery electrode architecture using X-ray nano-CT and image processing with deep learning. So this work is mainly the part of the PhD of two amazing guys, Xiliang Zhu and Tuantu Nguyen. So I will present you quickly outline of my presentation. There is two parts. The first one is about X-ray compute tomography. I will present you quickly a setup of this X-ray in micro and nano-CT. Also, a couple of examples with just absorption mode. And then I will switch to the phase contrast and holography mode as well. And when you will use electrochemical cell to do operando, I will provide you two examples with the phase contrast and the other one with Xanes spectroscopy. The second part will focus more on the image processing using a convolutional neural network. So the question is how to make the right segmentation when you have a multi-phase in the image. So we will see a different structure for CNN, but also a question around the hyperparameters. And we will see also new tools that Xiliang Zhu made called SegmentPy, which is a tool to optimize the parameter, the hyperparameter for CNN. And finally, we will discuss a new point for the group around the image quality assessment before the segmentation. But first of all, I guess this question is a main question for the people working on the 3D architecture of electrode. So what is the impact of this 3D architecture on the electrochemical properties and transport properties, of course? So all the people try to estimate the porosity, tortuosity, interconnection, interface area. So all of this is, of course, very useful when you try to simulate the transport properties in electrode based on standard Newman model, for example. You see here the ratio of tortuosity and porosity, which impact the Newman models. So you can estimate with some relationship this relation between the tortuosity and the porosity, for example, with Brugman, but in the real life is more complicated than that because unfortunately you have plenty of heterogeneity in the electrode. So you need to have more details about the 3D structure in electrode. So that's why the X-ray tomography is a tools which can provide you real details in 3D with a high accuracy. And this is the basic of the tomography here. You have the acquisition. So you have a rotation of the samples and you acquire a sinogram. So it's a 2D projection recording and from 0 to 180 degrees. So you have dead angle or not dead angle. It depends if you use operando cell. And then you have to switch to a sinogram to the reconstruction of the image. So for that, you use Fourier space using a radon transform with the back projection. Basically, for our side, we use tools. It's a library developed in APS called TomoPy. With these tools, you can select different algorithms to make the reconstruction with iteration or iteration, and which is very, very interesting. There is a community around that, and every month there is new tools to complete this library. So basically, we have two modes. There is micro CT with a very wide field of view. Resolution is a half of micron, and also on the other part there is a nano CT with a very amazing resolution, close to 20 nanometers. The full of view is less, of course, around 150 micron. And this one makes real because the last 20 years, there is a huge development around the zone plate, which is basically kind of lens of X-ray, which able to the X-ray to have a clear point of focalization. And then also a huge development around the camera with the rapid acquisition, specific detectors. And of course, there is now in France, especially with ESRF, development around the fourth generation of synchrotron, provide a high photon flux. And this one is very interesting, especially in terms of coherence. So all of this give us perfect tools to make a multi-scale analysis, a non-destructive collection, and a very speed acquisition. So it's a perfect tools for the 3D operando investigation, especially for the battery electrodes. So for that, we have to have this access to this synchrotron. Here I present 4 synchrotron. We have an access, especially the APS with Vincent de Andréade, and also in ERC-ARTISTIC. They will reopen often with the accessibility, with the ability which provide this 4th generation of synchrotron. We have also access in SLS and in Soleil with 2 dedicated beamline for the tomography. So here I will just show you a couple of examples based on the absorption of X-ray tomography. First of all is characterization of a micro battery. So we just detached the pillar of this battery, and the layers is deposited with the ALD technique. And the challenge was to see different layers around these pillars and see the configuration and the thickness of this layer. And clearly we can see in 3D here that the thickness and the homogeneity is relatively good for these samples. So for that, we use a ultra high resolution nano-CT developed by Vincent, around 20 nanometers of resolution. Other example is with a collaboration with Vincent Ciznek in LRCS, is with a very thick electrode. So this electrode is very porous. The purpose is to evaluate the porosity and tortuosity of these materials and try to see the homogeneity of porosity and interconnection of all these pores. So we did that, and we try to correlate this 3D information with the electrochemical properties. The other example is a new result we've got recently. Is on the all solid state battery. So we try to see if we have a very good connection between the part of the solid electrolyte inside the electrode to the main part of the solid electrolyte, which is the block we have in the middle here. And based on the small video we have here, we clearly see that all these grains are not perfectly connected to the center of the solid electrolytes, so which is not very good for the electrochemical properties. A last example for absorption X-ray compute tomography is on the 3D micro supercapacitor. So it was the same idea. We properly cut 1 pillars and we analyze just individual one. The idea was also to see the configuration of the surface and see how the thickness of the ALD deposition evolve as a function of the position on the pillars. So then there is another development around this X-ray imaging is based on the phase contrast. We call that Zernicke contrast. So we can use the amplitude of the wave, but also the phase of the wave. And by using the phase of the waves, we can increase the contrast of the image just by induce phase shifting. And this phase shifting is induced by the phase plate. You can see here the samples. We convert the beam on the samples, or a little bit shift here, and then we can induce a shift of the phase after all. And there is an interaction between a no dephase beam here and the beam with the phase shifting here. And the result is that we compare the absorption, pure absorption image. This is a carbon electrode. And when we use the Zernike phase contrast. The cross-section gives you an amplitude here of the contrast, and we can see clearly that we enhance the contrast with the Zernike phase contrast. So to reinforce what we observe, we just make some calculation to evaluate which phase shifting is the best to have this enhancement of contrast. And we found that around P/2 is something maximum for this specific materials. Here, the case we studied is LiO2 with carbon, LiO2 with carbon, yeah. So we use this technique to characterize a battery of Li2 battery. So before the cycling, we characterize the carbon electrode. So we can see the carbon with pores. And after the formation of Li2O2, so the Li2O2 can be clearly see here, it's pretty bright. So the pristine one, after reconstruction, so we identified the porosity and the 3D configuration. We can extract the volume fraction as a function of the pore diameter. And then after discharge, we can see the shape of Li2O2 we form in the electrode. And what we see here is that we notice a strong deformation of the carbon configuration after the formation of this Li2O2. The other interesting notice is that we only use a third of the surface carbon. A third of the surface carbon is just covered by Li2O2, means there is a certain part of the carbon which is not used for the electrochemical reaction. So maybe due to the no accessibility to the electrolyte, or some no open pores as well. So these two techniques, absorption and Zernike, is very interesting, but is more or less separate techniques. So here I will present you a holography technique. This technique tries to correlate or to add these two approaches, the phase contrast and absorption. The principle is this one. You try to make the acquisition of tomography at different distance. For each distance, you have a shift of the phase of the waves. So, and you have 4 different phase shifting. And using a specific algorithm, you can reconstruct and get an entire retrieval of the phase of your object. So that gives you a perfect information about the heavy elements. Here it's an NMC electrode. So the heavy element here is in bright, and also in the CBD, which is more in gray. And you have a dark part corresponding to the pores. So these techniques, it's only accessible in a ERS-RF, and it's a unique technique to precisely observe in the same time with the composite electrode, the EV element and the light element, means NMC and CBD. This is what we've got after reconstruction and segmentation. We can see here a volume. So we just discard the CBD particle, and we can see here the NMC particle, and you can see here the CBD parts. And you can also make a quantification of the different phases, sorry. Then you can focus on individual CNM NMC particles. Here we draw the and the porosity. You can see here the porosity. So then you have the coverage in individual particle of NMC with the CBD and the pores. And also what is still in red is a connection of NMC particles, means the solid diffusion. So this tool is very, very powerful to properly characterize the NMC electrode. So that's why we use that to go further by using a statistical approach considering these two phases. So we try to separate every single NMC particles, and we treat all the single NMC particle with a statistical approach. This is what we've got. We have 3 different samples, and we see for the different sample with different loading and different CBD content. And we see for the specific sample, Na7, we have less contact between CBD and NMC and more contact between pores and NMC. This is what we see here when we correlate NMC coverage with pore coverage. So we see the same trend. And when we compare this trend with the conductivity, we measure with a 4-probe local measurement. We see for this sample, the conductivity is very low, so which is very consistent with what we observe with the statistical approach. The other aspect is if you see the flow through pathway here, you see that the flow through pathway for the carbon network is very less here than for the two first case, which is also consistent with the conductivity and with the contact with the carbon and the active materials. So it's pretty clear that for the 2 first samples, we have more dense and thicker carbon than for the 3rd case, which is relatively consistent with the high conductivity. However, for the 3rd case, the surface of the pores on NMC is higher, which can impact also the electrochemical properties. This is exactly what we observe, because as 1C, the best capacity we observe is for this case. So here we see that it's kind of good balance. We need a good contact, a good connectivity with the carbon network, but if the carbon network is too high and cover a huge part of the NMC, you have less part for accessibility for liquid electrolyte. So you need a kind of balance to have a good performance for the battery. So let's switch to the electrochemical operando experiments. So here I present you the 2 cell, because 2 made this X-ray computed tomography cell. This one is a specific electrochemical cell with a very thin parts, just to minimize the dead angle during the tomography experiment. It's made with a glassy carbon window. We use the glassy carbon window as a window, but also as a current corrector. So to do this experiment, we cut some specific areas in the carbon electrode for 2 reasons. The first one is to clearly identify where is the zone of interest. And the other thing is during the rotation to avoid this shadow due to the matter when you have a high angle of rotation. To minimize this effect, we just cut some parts on the two side of the zone, so we minimize this effect. What we observe is a relatively good electrochemical response, and for each peak you can see here, there is a relaxation of 6 minutes, just the time to acquire the tomography. the thermogram, and we make a thermogram at different state of charge. So what we observe is the formation of Li2O2. We can see that here. We have dispersion of this particle in a volume, and when we focus on these particles, you can recognize the kind of donuts shape, which is something very common in these materials when you study that by SEM, for example. But the current density we use is very low, so we suppose that we have at the very early stage of the reaction. So what we see here seems to be close to the first age of the nucleation and growth. This is the first example of the monitoring by operando experiment of this kind of LiO2 experiment. So let's see something more sophisticated. Here we try to couple three things. Of course, a nano-CT, the operando with the use of this two cell, but also we try to couple the image with the Xanes spectroscopy. Means we try to see and to acquire a different thermogram at different energy around the edge of nickel. As you know, when you cycle NMC, you play with the oxidation of state of nickel from 2+ to 4+. So when you change the lithium state, so the number of lithium in your materials, you will switch this edge here. So if you take different thermogram at different energy, you can see a change of the intensity. And based on this change of this intensity around this edge, you are able to follow the reaction of lithiation and delithiation. This is what you can see here. This is a 3D representation of the thick and dense electrode, NMC 622. And the red part is the part where you have a lithium, and the blue and green part is where the lithium is absent. So take a look on the scale bar here. So you have huge details because we are in a nano-CT mode, and this information can be correlated with the position of the CBD. So if we can put in the same image the variation of lithium content or variation of the intensity due to the shift of this nickel edge with the position of CBD around the particle in the network, we'll be able to clearly correlate the electron network with the electrochemical reaction with the active materials. This is the goal of this study. Okay, I'm done with the tomography and operando experiments. Let's switch to the image segmentation. So for one session in synchrotron, we back with around 100 gigabytes of data. So which is huge. We are totally agree with that. And then we have to, of course, reconstruct the data, but also make a segmentation of the data. And segmentation of the data means you have to separate the three phases for the case of NMC electrodes. This is a multi-phase material. So you have a pore, CBD, and NMC. So the basic way to do that is to use a gray level thresholding. As you can see here, this is a distribution of gray level. For the three phases, there is overlapping, a huge overlapping of this three phase, especially for the phase in between, which corresponding to the CBD. And the consequence is we have no overestimation of this phase in the segmentation process. This is exactly what we have here. The gray level and the CBD is huge around this particle, for example. So to try to overcome this problem, we try to use a deep learning network. So this one is based on a network and it take into account a different feature, not only the gray level, but the shape, the age, the local and global features, the contrast, the blurring, the noising, all different aspects is taken into account here. And this is the reason why we've got a better result in terms of discretization of these different phases. The only thing is all the deep network, neural network is based on the ground truth. So means image reference, and the convergence on the network is always the comparison between the results and this image reference. And this one is made by the human hand and can provide a huge, could be a source of a huge error in the final results. We will see this aspect in details, but you have to keep in mind that the deep learning network is not a magic stuff. It's something at the end, you have to validate the points using your own ability to label the image. So when you start with the CNN architecture, you have to think about the structure of the CNN. So people can use different architecture as UNet or SegNet. So we try to first use that. So there is different dimension of the network. There is different convolution layers. There is different type of connection between the layers. And all this one is not specifically dedicated for your task. So that's why when you try to use a basic architecture, the consequence is you have huge amount of layer which is not activated. So this one is very bad for you because you waste your time and you have a huge part of the network which is not used. So that's why we try to focus and try to made an own architecture for the CNN and try to make a structure specifically dedicated for the segmentation of battery image from the X-ray CT technique. So we try to eliminate some convolutional layers. If we compare to UNet, this one is a UNet structure. We try to connect it, instead image, we induce index. We try to minimize the number of layers as well. And we got very good time in terms of calculation. We can finish training after 6 minutes. So we have a clear gain in terms of time. And this one is for a stack of 800 image. So this aspect is very interesting, but again, you spend a lot of time to find the right architecture. So if you go to one of the first guy who developed this CNN structure, Yann Lequin, he proposed simply to consider the CNN structure as a basic hyperparameters. So maybe for in the future, could be interesting to consider the structure as another hyperparameter and by iteration try to find which structure is the best for your own task. But for us now, we have a specific architecture for the segmentation. We call that LRCS-net. So the other point we have to optimize in this CNN is a hyperparameter. So we have the input, image input, you go through the network, and then you compare the outputs with the labeling, the ground truth I told you just before. Then you have to optimize a certain number of hyperparameters. There is a conventional layer, there is a pooling layer, active function, a batch normalization. You have to pay attention about the batching, augmentation. So its optimization step is very complicated and is very time consuming. So that's why Ziliang Zhu developed in the lab the SegmentPy, which is very interesting tool because it's a quick testing hyperparameter. You can use a multiple GPU, and you can also avoid to coding, which is very interesting. You can go inside, but of course with this interface user, you can easily put your different hyperparameter. For example, here you can put your models, so the LRCSnet, but also UNet or SegNet. Your kernel size, you can put your batch size, a number of epoch, and if you want to put a dropout or not. So all these parameters can be set and tuned with this interface, which is very interesting. The other aspect is here. I provide you the example. We optimize different hyperparameters, and we try for on whole case with the LRCSnet which parameter is the best to get a high accuracy. For example, a kernel dimension. We check with kernel 3x3, 7x7, 5x5. A number of kernel, of course. Here we see clearly that the most is not the best, because when you use 48 convolution, it's not with this one you get specifically the high accuracy. And also the example with learning rate, we have also to find which learning rate is best to have a higher accuracy. So all this ability to tune or optimize hyperparameter is very interesting. There is another aspect with SegmentPy, is monitoring during the training. So you have accessibility of every layers and to see the associated image inside the CNN. So here I just give you an example with the last layer. We can visualize the 64 channels and see, for example, if you want to properly go to the image and see how the phase is selected, how is distributed in the image. You can see that here you have the raw image. You have a channel with an MC for the pore for CBD, and also you can go to a specific feature like a border of CNN of CNM, and you have finally the result with the segmentation. This is another good aspect for SegmentPy. So the problem of all the CNN, especially for the image treatment, is how can we evaluate the impact of the ground truth on the final image and the final result. So this question, behind this question, there is all the question around the supervising, because all the model we use here, this is supervised models. So what we try to estimate here is, it's very simple. Is if we use different ground truths, what is the impact of the final result? So we start with the reference ground truth. We generate 15 labels, and we train 15 CNN at different with the 15 labels. So we've got a 15 prediction, and we try to evaluate this prediction. So what we see here is on the same image is the addition on this 15 ground truth. So to generate the 15 ground truth, we just apply a function with a Gaussian to add or subtract a pixel at the interface of these three phases. And what we've got is a representation of all this variation here in this image in 2D, and in this image is 3D. So then we're back to the segmentation, and we use intersection of union which is a very good matrix to qualify the segmentation. And what we see here is the impact of the ground truth on the final segmentation. For the NMC, it's relatively low. The impact is not so high. But have a look on the CBD or on the pores. Means when you ask to the people, even if it's a specialist or not specialist, the labeling you've got finally will impact your results. So it means deep learning is not an unhuman tools. It's always with the hands of human inside the process, and this error will change the final result. We focus on the interface as well, and interface between the three phase, and it's relatively obvious, but we have also an influence of the CBD on the distribution of interface. This is an interface in terms of percentage of voxel, and we see that the interface between a CBD and NMC is relatively broad and is less broad, and the value is lower for the NMC and pores. So this study is very interesting because we try to focus on the limitation on our models, and I guess all the limitation on the image treatment and segmentation is mainly due to the object, of course, you study, but also the labeling you can do and you provide to your neural network. So we try to continue this interrogation, and the question we try to address here is, can we try to estimate the quality of the image before the segmentation? So how to estimate the quality of the image to be segmented as well as possible. And you can see another question is kind of estimation of the best pre-processing, because sometimes we can use a filter to minimize the blurry or also the noise in the image, and this pre-processing can also induce some uncertainty in the segmentation. So all this question is a crucial question in the supervised CNN. This is possible to switch from supervised to semi-supervised, and we can point out another aspect, which is a huge problem. This is a human eyes. So you ask to human to make a labeling, but you know the gray level of human eyes, it's a 1/28 level of gray level, which is very low. If you compare to the acquisition on the camera we use for the X-ray imaging, we use 4 billion of gray level. So you have amazing quality of image, and finally you ask to human eyes to qualify or labeling this image. This is totally unbelievable. So we try to continue by this way and try to get information about the quality of the image, and we use the rank IQA, which is a CNN network, and we can try to get a no reference image quality assessment. But so far, this rank IQA is based on the natural image. So you have to use a database to qualify this image. But so far, we have no specific database for the battery materials. This is our problem here. So here it's a strategy we use. So we start with the image. So we induce some distortion to the image. We induce a blur, a noise, and the ring artifact. This is a three main distortion we have in the tomography image. And then we train with IQA, and we've got a ranking, a rank loss at the end. Then we have a labeling of the human, and we refine the ranking of this image by comparison between the distortion we have and the IQA training and the human labeling. This is what you've got. You've got the prediction. And after this prediction, we make a quick survey just to validate our models. And based on the correlation between the prediction image and the image given by or the ranking given by the human, we can clearly see from more than 30 images that the trend is relatively equal. Means our prediction is relatively close to what a human can detect in terms of distortion. So, but all of this supposed to be validated by the segmentation step, because our final purpose is to see if the quality of the image can impact also the segmentation and the segmentation results. And also the labeling we make on this image can influence the segmentation results. So all this question is around the ability to human to qualify, to labeling, and all this aspect is very crucial in this this treatment about the segmentation of X-ray tomography image. Okay, thank you very much for your attention. I would like to thank special guys. So Zingyang Zhu and Tuantu Nguyen. They did amazing job. So I guess they finish their PhD at the end of this year. And if you want a very talented guy and very motivated guy in your group for a postdoc, don't hesitate to contact them. I think it's a good thing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Arnaud, for your amazing and very beautiful presentation, beautiful image. Thank you. So we have some time for questions. I mean, you can go as usual in the question session. And I think you have a couple of questions there. And also you have some questions in the chat.
Okay.
You should click Start Live. If you want, I can do for you. You should go to the very top. Now we see your screen.
Very top?
Yes. Yes, there is 2 questions in the top, so you can click in Start Live answer. Yes, nice.
Oula.
Yes,
okay.
This is why you are sharing the screen, but anyway, that's a matter.
Okay. So a sort of interaction between the glassy carbon electrode and the X-ray signals that can affect your current measurements. Yes, so the current measurements means the X-ray tomography measurement or the electrochemical measurement. I'm not sure. So we test both. So the electrochemical measurements, we test it, and there is no specific interaction. Is relatively good in terms of electrochemistry. For the X-ray, there is, of course, interaction with liquid electrolyte, but not so much with the glassy carbon electrode.
Good. So it's a question from
I don't know.
Jake. So in the very top.
This one?
Yes. This is for you.
So I'm wondering, what is the minimum voxel you present in the work concerning the characterization? So the minimum voxel size for the nano-CT, so the minimum voxel, because there is 2 aspects you have to keep in mind, is the resolution and the voxel. And we use the voxel around 30 nanometers or 25 nanometers. And the resolution is around the double 2 voxel. To define the resolution is 50 nanometers.
Good. Then you have some questions in the chat. If you go to the very, you should go to the very down. Yes. More. Yes, there's question from Emiliano. I mean, it's very down. You should go down. Yes. More. Because these questions are for Miran. Yes, this one.
Okay. Okay, I was wondering about the resolution in holography technique related to the lighter elements. Yes, so you use a reconstruction specific algorithm to reconstruct the phase in holography. So the resolution is also limited by the reconstruction itself, but they provide something. The beamliner provides something like 50 nanometer of resolution, spatial resolution. But the question is if the resolution is different between the carbon and the heavier element. So this one is apparently, no, it's the same resolution, spatial resolution. The contrast could be different for sure, but in terms of resolution, it's the same.
Okay, so there is one question from Mehdi. You can see below.
So I was curious about the volume ratio. Okay. Which is quite low. I'm not sure if you Mehdi, you see my screen now?
Yes, maybe you can repeat the question, to share with everyone.
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, I was curious about the volume ratio of the NMC electrode you have shown for the Zermanier technique. You report 15% of porosity, which is quite low. Okay. Yeah, for this one, we report 15 in terms of porosity. Yes, I'm not sure if it's the same for, because this one it was the first sample we studied, but yes, this is the value we've got. It's not always the case, but we have to check if we make the segmentation here with the LRCS network, or if it's just with the Weka. I'm not sure about it, but this is the value we've got first, for sure.
Okay, Arnaud, I think it's time to move to the next talk, and really thank you for being with us today and for having presented your amazing tomography work. I'm sure that people enjoy your presentation. And if there are more questions, please answer directly in the chat or in the question session. Okay?